A few weeks ago, I talked about some reptiles that I said are never going to be pets, but I mean, who knows? Maybe in the year 2361, they'll figure out a way to make sea turtles house pets. The reptiles we're talking about today, on the other hand, you are definitely never going to be able to have these reptiles as pets, but that's mostly because they don't exist, and some are as big as the planet. Mythical creatures range from the uninspired and kind of lame to some truly fantastic beasts. Now, mythical reptiles, they've kind of always gotten the short end of the stick because they're usually portrayed as evil, but there's also just not a whole lot of them outside of a few examples that are in the same kind of like common knowledge popularity league as like the unicorn. The reptiles we're going to be talking about today range from hugely widely popular throughout modern pop culture and also just many different ancient civilizations throughout history to reptiles that you've probably never heard of before. First up is the Lernian Hydra, or the Hydra of Lerna, or just the Hydra as it's come to be known, which was a giant multi-headed snake that was minding its own dang business when that idiot Hercules came out of nowhere to kill it for no reason, which unfortunately happens with a lot of snakes. Just kidding, now we're going to play a game called Adam Ruins Disney's Hercules. In Greek mythology, Zeus's wife Hera was actually a huge, not nice person, and she was constantly trying to kill Hercules because Hercules wasn't her son. Zeus actually cheated on Hera with a mortal woman, and that's why Hercules is a demigod, and she just never forgave him. Do you remember in the movie when Big Bad Hades sends Pain and Panic to go kill baby Hercules so they turn into two venomous snakes? Of course, to do it. Yeah, in Greek mythology, Hera is actually the one to send the venomous snakes to kill baby Hercules. And Hera raised the Hydra for the sole purpose of killing Hercules. And in mythology, Hercules was able to kill the Hydra too. It was his second task. But every time he cut off one of the heads, he would actually scorch the neck so that that head couldn't grow back. Now, the Hydra has been around for a really long time, and it's obviously most closely associated with Greek mythology. But when it first came around, which as far back as we could tell is about 800 to 1000 BCE, it actually had a set number of heads. It didn't have infinite heads. But as the years kind of went on and more storytellers and poets kind of gave their own interpretations and upped the head count for drama, finally one author named Heraclitus came up with the Hydra being able to regrow and multiply heads indefinitely with each one that was chopped off. And not only does it have infinite heads, but it also has this poisonous, like acidic blood, and it can breathe toxic gas. And if you were to like look for one in the wild, then the only place they're found, I guess you could say, is the Lake of Lerna, which is actually a gateway to the underworld. The Hydra is a fairly common recurring thread in a lot of movies and books and even video games, most recently in the game Hades, where you play as Hades' son, and he affectionately nicknames the Hydra Lerny.
Why, hello, Lenny. What have you been up to since I last destroyed your multitude of heads?
We're going to talk about some really beautiful, irreverent reptiles today that have this certain elegance and grace about them. And then we're going to talk about this guy with a crocodile head. Sobek is an Egyptian god who served many different roles. God of crocodiles, obviously, god of water, god of the Nile River, god of fertility, god of protection. He's linked to many different things. But at the end of the day, he's an all-powerful god man with a croc face. Sobek was actually quite a long-standing god in Egypt's pantheon of many gods, being worshipped from 2700 BCE to as recent as 300 or 200 BCE, and obviously takes inspiration from the top predator of the Nile River, the Nile crocodile. And he's not always just a man with a crocodilian complexion. Sometimes he has a form where he's just a straight-up giant crocodile. Apparently, Sobek started out as more of a dark, angry, vengeful god that the Egyptians had to appease and were a bit more afraid of. But by the end of his time being a worshipped being, he had become a lighter god in people's minds, and they'd actually routinely pray to him or give him offerings for protection in the afterlife and other boons. And they actually worshipped him so much in some areas that they renamed an entire city Crocodilopolis, which sounds like somewhere an excited 5-year-old me would want to live. And they would also captively raise Nile crocodiles as living representatives of Sobek, and they would mummify and entomb them with the recently deceased, whether it was adult crocs, juveniles, even eggs, to serve as protection into the afterlife. We're going to talk about a lot of reptiles today, but really none of them are just straight up reptilian gods. In case you can't tell, I'm a bit of a fan when it comes to mythology, and we can't talk about mythological reptiles without talking about the largest one to ever grace our planet. In fact, it's in the name, the world serpent. Jormungandr, or the Midgard serpent, was just a freaking massive snake. And now we're going to play the same game from earlier, Adam Ruins a Disney movie, except this time it's Thor Ragnarok. So Loki became a dad. He had 3 kids with this giantess, and I'm probably going to butcher her name, Angerboa. And these 3 kids were Hel, or Hela in Thor Ragnarok, the massive wolf Fenrir, and then this gigantic snake. Don't ask me how that works. Odin was so ticked off that he grabbed the young baby snake and threw it down into the oceans of Midgard, where it eventually would grow to be so big that it could reach around the entire equator and bite its own tail. And when the snake did inevitably release its tail from its mouth, this would be the cue for Ragnarok, or the Norse apocalypse, to start. And it would use its poisonous breath and the fury of the sea to destroy half the world, while Fenrir, the giant wolf, its brother, will set ablaze the other half and burn it to nothing. And during Ragnarok, there would be a giant end-all battle, which is basically where like every Norse mythological figure would die in some way or another. Thor will kill the behemoth world serpent, but he'll also die within walking 10 paces away from the body as he'd been poisoned during the fight. So Loki was somehow dad to a giant wolf and a colossal world-ending snake that killed his brother. And that's just scratching the surface of how messed up Norse mythology is. So we talked about reptiles related to Greek and Norse and Egyptian mythology. This one isn't so much tied to one mythology as much as it's tied to kind of the sea itself. The Zeratown is basically just a giant sea turtle roaming the oceans in kind of a mysterious way, and it's so large that its carapace actually has sometimes dense forests, rocky cliffs and mountains, even sometimes castles and cities on top of it. This concept is linked to many different stories and things. There's stories of the missing city of Atlantis on a sea turtle's back. There's also stories of, some portray it kind of like a trap for sailors to find at sea and take rest at, only for the turtle to dive when the sun falls and drown these poor souls. And on rare occasion, the Zeratown isn't portrayed necessarily as a giant turtle. Sometimes it's a giant fish, or a giant octopus, or even a giant whale like it is in the stories of Sinbad. This one, not this one. And sometimes it's not also just a sea turtle. This notion of a turtle kind of carrying civilization on its back is also tied to Hindu beliefs, where the world turtle, and you can see it right here, is a giant turtle that supported the entire world with its body. This concept probably sounds familiar to a lot of you because it's used a lot in modern media. I mean, you've got the Pokemon Torterra, that's a ground and grass type, which has a mountain and a tree on its carapace. You've also got the floating isle in that Aladdin straight to VHS sequel, where Aladdin meets his dad, and there's this big white city on the turtle's back, and there has this golden hand of Midas, you know, that one. And then probably the most special one in my heart, and another hugely widely popular example from the world of Avatar: The Last Airbender, the lion turtle, which is just a big, wise, magical creature that's responsible for giving mankind the ability to bend the elements in the first place, as well as helping Aang on his path to saving the world. I'm sure you all could guess what the #1 spot was going to be. Dragons are everywhere, and I mean everywhere. They're in movies and TV shows, books, video games, historical real-world cultures, and societal history. They are literally the most popular mythical creature today and probably throughout history. Probably the coolest thing about dragons is how varied and versatile they are. I mean, if you picture like a unicorn, it's a horse with a horn, but for dragons, some can be really small, some can be really big, some can be mind-bendingly colossal in size, some can swim, some can fly, some just live on the land, some are cute, some are terrifying, some are demonic, some are undead, some are helpful, some just want to kill you. They can breathe fire, they can breathe ice, they can control lightning and storms, they can control the seas. Literally, their design can be utilized by any imagination. In most cases, they end up looking pretty good to downright incredible. And they've also got a lot of different body types and features. There's the quadruped, broad-winged dragons from Europe, the serpentine, horned, and whiskered dragons from East Asia. There's sea dragons, Australian dragons, even American dragons. Scientists and anthropologists believe that all of these different ancient civilizations that were isolated from each other, South America, China, Europe, Australia, all of these places evolved and created their own concept of dragons independently throughout history. The dragon deities worshipped by the South American civilizations like the Aztecs were created independently from, say, the European dragons of the Middle Ages, like the big monstrous fire-breathing ones that knights would fight. And even those are vastly different from the dragons of ancient China and Japan, which have been around since before the year 5000 BCE. To put that into perspective, the woolly mammoth was still kicking around North America as recent as 3000 BC. Dragons are just ancient, primordial, revered beings. Just don't let them get hit by exploding ice spears, because undead ice dragons are a huge pain in the butt to deal with and are a huge CGI expense on the final seasons of shows. So those were 5 amazing mythological reptiles. Like the video if you learned something, comment down below which was your favorite. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you later.